So Mehak, welcome to this debriefing session. Congratulations on a 7:30.
Thank you, Rajat.
And so it's an improvement from a 6:40 is what you told me. So a good 90-point improvement over a very short time span. You said, but a few weeks or so.
Yeah, correct. That is correct.
So let's talk about your GMAT journey. You started you took your first attempt in 2015. Then you pushed things off for quite some time. Let's talk about how you resumed your studies and how did you go about improving to that 730 score.
So I think the delta was pretty pronounced in my case, and I approached my study preparation through three main levers. Firstly was to go through the concepts of quant and verbal from scratch. I knew them through high school, of course, we all go through that. But for me, the confidence of, re-going through them and kind of memorizing them again was very reassuring. So I did that. That was the first lever, was just go through the concepts. The second thing is, of course, practice. Never underscore practice. I would say consistency was key for me. So practicing every day, building your muscle memory, even if it's 10 questions a day, for each, I would say do each. People often underestimate the importance of integrated reasoning because it's not part of your 800 score. I would say as part of your daily practice, integrate that. Find a simpler way of doing this. Is I know there's not a ton of practice available online, but a very simple way that I found was very helpful is go online, look at the Economist sector. They publish a lot of graphs, publish a lot of really interesting data insights. Cover those insights, cover that article, look at that graph and find meaning out of it. Calculate growth rates, for example, right? See what things are telling you. These kind of see what, and then read the article to see, this is a two-pronged benefit. It will help you in your reading comprehension as well, because you'll be able to absorb things a lot faster. And the second thing is you'll be able to corroborate your insights from the one being presented by the author. So I would say keep that as a very regular part of your day, and you don't necessarily have to take out time for it on your commute to work, during lunch break. That's what I did. I love reading in general. So I used to use part of my lunch break, 15 minutes, go through a couple of articles in The Economist, make points, make a summary of that article, and facilitate your preparation there. Honestly, and the third benefit of that is, hey, you become smarter, right? You become more informed.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, you can sound smarter in front of your colleagues and your boss. And trust me, that holds immense brownie points. So definitely do that. So that would be the second thing, which is, go ahead, Rajat.
I just want to add to the Economist piece. I think in the world today, we have a lot of journals out there, but I think we're devoid of true journalism. And The Economist actually is one such publication that still believes in true journalism.
That's fantastic, actually. That's really well said. That is very, very true. And just to finish off the thought, on the third point I would like to make is that that's a sub-bullet actually of the practice, but it's important enough that it deserves some attention, is the error log. Always, 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 for a question that you get right or wrong, review it. So don't get very confident if you've gotten a 90% correct on the Scholaranium platform, which is a fantastic platform to practice on. Don't do that. Go through every answer, and there's some fantastic video solutions available for most of the questions that I encountered. Those really help you understand the author's thought process and the meaning behind it. A further corollary of the error log relief that helped me was being a little bit methodical about the way I managed my review session. So for every question I got wrong, I would put it across three categories. The first would be a silly mistake column. The second would be running out of time, usually happen towards the end of the practice session. And the third would be not knowing the concept.
Not know the concept, yes.
The way to plot the right answers would be if it's very simplistic, if it's a fluke, or whether I actually truly knew the concept. If it's a fluke, I would divert myself to the three buckets and kind of make a separate category that said, look at this in detail, what happened, right? Cover the answer potentially and revisit it. So those questions that were the fluke questions, I actually maintained a separate tab for them. Wow. I copy pasted them very simply.
And you're going to share that error log with us, by the way.
I will. It's a very intense situation. I hope you can decode it, Rajat. It's a lot of my own notes. It's very unformatted.
Have a video on top of it.
Basically, like an explanation video.
Just an explanation video, yeah.
But honestly, this didn't come to me organically. So this error log in itself was a work in progress. The categorization was fairly straightforward, but how to tag questions that, were fluke questions, things like that, that I learned on the fly. All that.
So I think let's go back to one step. I think we're going to
Sure.
go back a couple of steps and then resume from here.
Sure.
At 640 score, I think the first thing when we were talking earlier, you said you recognized quant was okay. Your verbal was where you needed work.
Absolutely.
And then you went through kind of two different phases of study. The first phase we talked about was that intense phase where you said 2 weeks, you took off from work. And
absolutely.
Let's talk about, and then the second phase was the 4-week phase where you primarily focused on practicing 25 questions a day. And then taking mock tests on the weekend. So let's go phase by phase. Those 2-week phase, what was your goal? Where did you spend your time? What did you achieve? And then the 4 weeks phase. So I think
Sure. I think that's a very fair categorization. So these 3 levers that I talked about manifested themselves in a 6-week odd net journey, 6 to 7 week. Part of the 6 weeks, the first 2 weeks was spent in a very rigorous understanding of all concepts. So as I said before, I went through each and every concept of verbal and quant. Quant, I absorbed from the Manhattan books. Very simply, they have all the formula there. For verbal, I did e-GMAT course. I had all my notes, so I took notes during the practice files were actually very good for me. Specifically for me, I found them very helpful because I like to apply things. I'm a learner that generally likes applying things and understanding them. So the practice files that way were very, very useful. So that's how I understood all the concepts. The 2 weeks, if you really break those down, I spent about 8 hours a day on an average studying. Net, I'd make sure that there were breaks in the middle. I made sure I slept 8 hours a night during those. So it wasn't one of those situations. 8 hours a day is not bad. You have time to take breaks. You have time to hang out with your family. You can go to bed at a reasonable hour. So all of that actually was very useful. At the end of the 2 weeks, just to calibrate my performance or just to calibrate, my concept understanding and seeing what impact knowing your concept and not doing any practice actually has on the actual score in itself. Because that's very important, right? People talk about how, like, if you don't practice quote unquote enough, you'll be okay. So I just wanted to challenge that myth a little bit because I thought that, during my preparation phase or concept phase, I was doing practice files, right? The e-GMAT one. So I'm like, chalo, thodi bahut, there's a little bit of practice. Let me go all out and write the test. And when I wrote the test at that point, my score was 670, which basically meant that there was a big jump that I wanted to get to. And I'm like, obviously that delta has to come through building muscle memory. So the ensuing 4 weeks after that, for me, I'm just very big on consistency in most things in life, whether it's a gym routine or, studying or work, etc. That's key. So I would make sure that the time on which I have to write the test, I take 1 hour off, right? And I block that time in my calendar. I took lunch at that point in time. So for me, that time then became sanctisanct for 4 weeks, nonstop. During the weekdays and weekends, of course, you have a lot more flexibility. And during that time, I did 20 to 25 questions in verbal, and then I did math. Sometimes, obviously, during that break, if you factor in, I wasn't able to get math. So math, potentially, I delayed to the evenings. But verbal, I made sure I did it because that was my weak spot. I did it during that time. And I use that error log, of course, to track my performance during that period.
This is where you categorize your errors in silly mistake, time, or did not know the concept. And then you also said if you didn't make an error, if you got the question right, you really said, okay, was it by fluke?
Agreed.
And then again, correspondingly, you revise the concepts.
Agreed. Exactly. That's what happened. After that, so we are standing right now at week 2 of 6, right? Which is where the 670 thing happened. At that point in time, I was tracking my performance. So say a week after that. So let's take week 3, just for simplicity purposes. I looked at my performance on my daily basis as a trend line, and I noticed that the bulk of my errors were actually stemming from not knowing the concept. That was a category, and running out of time. The running out of time by far was the largest category, but not knowing the concept was up there.
So I think let me just pause you there. So 25 questions, how much time would you give yourself?
I gave myself 50 minutes.
50. So 2 minutes per question. Got it. And how many questions would you approximately get wrong?
During that period of time, I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to spitball a number, but when I started off initially, because see, at that point in time, I had done a decent amount of prep in terms of concepts. So for verbal, I was getting, for example, 70 to 75% correct.
Okay, so when you say running out of time was the largest accounted for the largest, only out of the 25%. It's not again a huge number.
No, it wasn't a huge number.
Yes.
No, but again, the sample space is not that big either, right? So it's 25 questions. However, then I tracked that, I noticed that, so I took a step back. I'm like, okay, I don't know the concept. Let me do a deeper dive in the data that I had available. What I found was that sentence correction was actually where 80% or maybe 85% of my errors were coming from. So on week 3, the Sunday, I was just telling Rajat this, that I spent 12 hours, 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I took only, I think, maybe an hour break in the middle net to eat perhaps and go to the bathroom. And that was it. And I went through the entire curriculum of sentence correction again without the practice files. And so then just to kind of recalibrate myself. And then I did the same thing week 3 onwards, did practice questions, etc. And then that brought me to week 4.
Hold on. You spend these 12 hours. What was the impact?
That's what I'm telling you. So,
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So at week 4, when I recalibrated my practice results, what I found was that actually my performance had dramatically improved. And my questions that I was getting wrong, but then primarily stemming from silly mistakes. Because at that point in time, again, there's fatigue as well, right? Because you've been doing the same thing for 4 weeks, day in and day out. You kind of you're sick of it. Mentally, you're just like, you're done. So a lot of my errors were coming from there, which was really reassuring because I realized that those concept files had enabled me. They had given me basic grammatical toolkit, but the second most important thing that I feel I had missed out on, that was a reiteration, was to understand the author's meaning when you're approaching a sentence, the inherent intended meaning of the author. That for me was game changing because that helped me a lot from a strategy perspective, right? Because that helps you in critical reasoning as well. That is a very great tool for reading comprehension. Obviously, the entire exercise is founded on that, right? So I did that, and that really helped me even get up those just minor errors that were happening in RC, which was my strongest area actually. That helped me solve for those as well. So questions and main point questions, that toolkit really helped me to tackle those as well. Wow. So I was very, very excited about just that.
So we are in week 4. We're in week 4.
We're in week 4 right now, right? We're doing
okay. What's your accuracy in week 4?
So I'll tell you from a test score perspective. I'll have to pull this up. But as far as I remember, from that 670, by week 4, which is 2 weeks before exam day, I was scoring. So Manhattan, I was scoring a 690. But on the GMAT official guide test, which I took actually at week 4, the two free pack that you get, I had a 740 and a 760. So I was doing very well on those, right? Good, yes. So I'm like, that gives me a sense of confidence that, I'm on the right track. But what was interesting, and there's a curveball here as well, that on week 5, I remember, this was the Saturday where I wrote my practice tests and I did a random, I think it was a Veritas Prep test or one of these random tests that you find online. I got a pretty low score. I was back to a 670 and I was like, oh my God, this can't be happening right now. I'm a week out from the exam, but that's fine because I learned again, when I went through my errors, I realized the bulk of those errors were coming from silly mistakes. And when I redid those questions, I realized that I had just not paid enough attention. Sometimes talk about answer choices in a sentence correction question just to make it a little bit more tangible and relatable. Sometimes you have the 3-2 split. It's not going through each answer choice very methodically. So I'm like, okay, fine. The next day, I didn't do any test. On Sunday, I realized I was just on a mental perspective, attention fatigue had seeped in. And knowing myself, I'm like, you know what, I'm feeling very burnt out right now, so I'm not going to do it. So I didn't do a test on Sunday, which was kind of beating the norm of what I generally do. And I did a test on Wednesday. It was some holiday.
What did you do on Sunday?
Nothing. I did not touch my books. I was like, I need a break. Okay. So Sunday, I didn't do anything. I just took a break.
That was very brave.
I just took a break. I'm like, you know what, doesn't matter. I went through my errors. I'm like, yes, it's a bit of a punt, but I'm like, there's no point of doing something that you're not fully invested in. So I took a break on a Sunday. I took a break on a Monday also because I did coincidentally had a lot of work. So I'm like, today I can't take that lunch off. I have a long working day. I'm not going to do it. Tuesday, I did random practice questions. And I did pretty well on them. I'm like, Wednesday, I'm pretty brave enough. There was a holiday. It was one of those middle week holidays. I'll do a test. I did a test and I was back to that 700 plus. I think it was a 710 or a 720. It was a Veritas. So it was a tough test. And I was like, okay, I feel I'm back on track. Let me continue this momentum. Next weekend was my last weekend before the GMAT. So my test was, so there was a weekend and then my test was on a Tuesday. Weekend, I did those 2 practice tests, got a 710 and a 730, something around that line. 710 was in Manhattan. 730, you don't get those additional questions from the additional tests, from GMAT official guide. So I purchased those and it was on that. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is somewhat semi-decent. Let me go, and now I'm ready for the tests. Monday, Tuesday again. My recommendation, honestly, you're training for a marathon. You're not training for a sprint. So don't OD on writing tests. Focus more on method. So value over volume any day for me, that really helped, and consistency. So I didn't do much on Monday and Tuesday, literally just went over some tips, went through my error log and made some notes on the side for some key concepts, things to look out for. And e-GMAT actually has some great content in terms of chapter summaries. If you want to get a good refresher, that's what I did. I didn't really take time off. Wednesday was my only day off, which is Tuesday when I took the test. And that was about it. And I wrote the GMAT and I got a 730.
So first of all, what is your split? Q and V?
I can just share that with you. Actually, I get now because this was a really long time ago. So I will post that in chat for you.
Okay.
Shortly.
Okay. Then the second thing is, so you took the test at 11 a.m. So this was an in-center test.
Correct. It was. This is a pre-COVID. Yeah.
This is a pre-COVID scenario. Okay. All right. So we'll wait for your quant and verbal piece. But
yeah.
Thank you for this. So now you follow the meaning-based approach in SC, you follow the methods in reading comprehension. What about critical reasoning? Did you do pre-thinking there?
Yes, always. I followed the approach in e-GMAT to the T. So everything that was said, I understood the fact that it's a completely process-driven situation. I didn't want to contaminate the process there, because respecting that process had helped me get good results during my practice. So that meant pre-thinking. That meant pre-thinking, even in RC, actually, some great tips came out of that. Pre-thinking the main point is what I mean. Yes. So not looking at the question on the side, but just as soon as you're done with your summary of the passage, in your head, figure out what the main point is. Spend all of 10 seconds. And that really helped me, because invariably that question always comes, right? Is what is the author trying to convey through the passage? So that was very, very useful for me, is going through that.
Okay. Now I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if I am, because you're someone who's very data driven. So maybe you already have an answer to this. So you have a 730. So if you were to really go for a 760, what are 2 or 3 areas that you would want to be better in?
If I want to go for 760, actually you're motivating me now to actually register.
I'm not motivating you. All I'm saying
is you are just for kicks.
So what are the 2 or 3 areas? Yes. What were the 2 or 3 areas that you would focus on today? You say, man, I want to get better in these 2 or 3 areas.
So from a prep, so I'm going to tackle this into approaches from a actual writing test day perspective and a prep perspective. I think prep is a little bit more.
Prep
is a lot more relevant here. So I'll talk about that. What I would do, honestly, is focus less on the sheer volume of questions that I did. Because I personally felt that I did an overkill towards the end in just the number of questions. So if you multiply 40 questions on an average per day times about 7 weeks, excluding tests, by the way, imagine the number of questions that is. That's a lot of questions. Yes. It becomes counterproductive. It's actually, yes, that's diminishing return. It doesn't take Einstein to figure that out, right? So I would focus a lot less on questions, a lot more. So instead of, say, doing 25 questions a day, do maybe 10, or not 10, well, do 50, right? Reduce that and really get into what that question meant, and then identify patterns more, which I did not focus enough time on. So that, I think, if I did that because I built in a lot of those concepts for me, maybe I would do 10 questions a day. But some of the harder, they say quote unquote 700 level questions. So the hard category in Solidarium, or the medium and hard category combination, is really do less of those, but do more in terms of cadence, and eliminate lazy ones.
And analyze the question a lot more, essentially.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. So
I am
spend
really
double the
glad you
time
said
reviewing. Spend double the time reviewing the question. So the time I would save on doing less questions, I would spend more on reviewing. So not compromising, by the way, that hour-and-a-half prep time on a daily basis at all, but just reallocating that time across categories. I think that's very important. That's one thing I would do differently. And I think that would be the only thing I would do differently.
I absolutely agree. I've seen many people just do just that and then improve to that 760 score. Okay.
Yeah.
So INSEAD, you've now received an admit from INSEAD, and you're going to be joining. You said in March.
Yes.
Okay.
No, March. Sorry, Jan 2021.
Jan 2021. Okay. Why INSEAD? I mean, you're from Canada. You're in Islamabad right now. So why INSEAD?
It's always been a dream school for a variety of reasons. I don't want to sound like a marketing pitch for them, but really,
you can. I'm sure they'll be happy.
So the first one really is, I'm not even going to understate this, it's just brand equity. It's very highly ranked so that was one thing. That was not the first. This list is in no particular order, but that was a big factor. When you're younger, these things appeal to you, right? So I'm talking about when I was an undergrad. That's something I really was very fascinated by, is how well it did on the world rankings. Only European school.
So back in Canada, you were
back in Canada, like 2009. That was when the dream was born. Let's put it like that.
Also, where in Canada, just to be very specific?
Well, McGill University, so Montreal.
Montreal, okay.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So that was where it germinated. So that was one thing. The second thing is that I had done my undergrad in Canada. I knew I was going to work in Canada. So, and because by virtue of my job, I entailed a lot of travel to the US. Bigger cities in the US. So New York was a very primary destination, Boston and Chicago, the three markets I went to quite a bit. So I had gotten that North American feel and flavor out of the way. I wanted to go to Europe and really get into a net new culture. I sincerely believe that cultural diversity, not just in terms of culture, actually, I would take a level deeper. Diversity in terms of schools of thought, in terms of ideas, was very critical for my learning during my undergrad, and I wanted to extrapolate that. Both in terms of geography, but also in terms of going to a school that really valued that. Most MBA programs, at least the top ones, value that, but I know INSEAD prides itself a lot on that. So I wanted to, that was another reason. And the third one really is just from a pure ROI standpoint as well. It's a 1 year, it's a basic, not even a full 1 year program. It's a 10-month program. So you realize the return on investment, if you normalize even the average starting salary, you realize that a lot sooner than going to a top tier US school. So that's what my reasoning was. But to be honest with you, if I had to redo that and undo the process, I think my starting point was a bit incorrect. My starting point really should have been, what sector do I want to land in, and which geography I want to land. Those are very important things. So by sector, I mean industry and job function, and where do I want to ultimately, and then work back from there. I'm giving you the most candid answer because that's how I thought. But in reality, for anyone who's making this decision, that's how they should evaluate it. And I applied to 3 schools. I got into all 3, but for me, and from a pure financial perspective, it was either INSEAD or it was nothing. So those two schools were kind of...
The other 2 were?
Were Cambridge and IMT.
Okay.
So it was either, INSEAD or it was no MBA at all.
Got it.
Right now also I'm in amidst of a little bit of a dilemma whether I want to go or not go with existing conditions of what's happening in the world. But I know you're looking at me being like, what?
Why?
No, because we don't know. There may be a program deferral. We're all evaluating those options. There's a lot of hearsay.
In Europe? No.
But people don't want to commit. So that's a conversation you and I can have offline. But but yeah, that's not a very big part of this process. But yeah, that was it. Those are my reasons.
Okay.
I could say.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very fascinating conversation. I think we should have it. One of our employees, he just left on the 31st for Keenan Flagler.
Nice.
And,
oh wow, lovely.
And so I was having this conversation with him, and I know a few of my students have deferred. So we want to actually have a webinar in the near future.
Nice, let's do that. You should definitely do that. You have an audience there out there.
Yeah, so a few folks who I know have deferred, others who I know have not.
Lovely. Okay.
And so it's very, and both of them have their own research to really back their decisions up with.
Right.
But anyhow, So INSEAD or no INSEAD, you said it has to be INSEAD and you love the school.
Absolutely, yes. That's
How did you do your application for it?
You don't want to ask how your application for it.
Why
That's
not?
another, knowing me, that was as intense as my GMAT prep.
So did you do it yourself? Simple. Yourself or with an admissions consultant?
100% myself. I had a very Eastern, I want to say, without sounding culturally biased against my own culture, but I had a very, piecemeal approach to doing it, which was the fact that I made an Excel sheet of 21 people that I know that have a connection to the school, either they're an alum. So I divided the list between alums, students, current students, and people who know me well. So friends and family, close enough friends and family, right? And I've created a storyboard that I felt was my personal journey, professionally and personally. Put that together. I had one person from that list first review it, which was my father. Then I had a friend review it. And then there's a mentor at work who falls into the friends and family category, knows me pretty well. So he really challenged me on that storyboard in itself. That was kind of like the universal storyboard that I used across my application. So I focused a lot on that. I figured out, how to really pitch my personal narrative.
I just want to put those 21 people in context.
Yeah.
How many of them had done an MBA?
Not that many. Other than the students, so students and alumni, right, from the school.
But other than the students and alumni.
Oh, nobody. None of them. None of them had done an MBA.
And how many of the students and alumni were like in the close friend circle, I would say?
Not that many. Very, like maybe 25%.
So, I mean, how many number, if I were to?
In terms of numbers, so 25% of 21 would be.
So you had 5 friends who were.
Oh, there was some overlap. The rest were literally LinkedIn cold messages. I'm not even kidding.
Okay.
So I reached out to them.
5 is pretty good though.
Yeah. So I reached out to a variety of people, got my storyboard done. Storyboard was reviewed by 3 people, friends and family category. After that, when I was confident, and that also took a while, right? You don't come up with that overnight. So you have to constantly try to control it, try to like fix it, tweak it here and there. So that took about a month. I was very luxurious with my time, but because I was, again, work was kicking in and there was multiple priorities on that I had to tackle. However, I put that together, and then so the essays in INSEAD, I always say this, it's 2,500 words.
Oh yes.
Split across 8 essays, right? Yes. And there's an optional, which is not an optional essay. I would encourage every person to use that real estate very wisely, because you want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward. That doesn't mean writing something that don't be repetitive, because application is very, very comprehensive. But if you personally feel that you are bringing something to the class and you can't capture that in the rest of the words, do not be afraid to write. And I use my optional essay, although in the, they tell you that you don't necessarily have to use it. A lot of students told me not to use it. They're like, you don't want to waste their time. But I had a personal life story that I wanted to say. So I used those 300 words to say that. Right? Okay. And I don't think that it was a personal story. I don't think that it was a value addition to the class. Per se, I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe it added something to my personality, but I felt that the AdCom needs to know that about me, because that was a defining moment for me. And I felt that needed to be captured. So I would say that. But in terms of answering your question, after the storyline, I wrote my first essay, which was my first set of essays, which was the career essays, because I wanted to get those gleaned by the person who fell within the friends and family category. And also I wanted to get that checked by alumni, because they had exposure to my industry. So they would be best equipped to kind of give me constructive feedback on that.
Okay.
So they went through.
I'm going to interrupt you just right there, because
go ahead.
Over our time. But this is, I think, a fascinating thing. We should actually do a session on this, a real proper session on this.
Anytime, Rajat. Anytime.
Okay. So I'm actually pinning you down to just say I'm going to have
a
session on INSEAD, and I'm going to invite you on that one. I want to ask just one data point, and I'm very big on data, and then we'll go into.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
How many times would you have iterated over each essay?
Do not. Okay, so you know how many times?
Just
God's honest
number. Pure number. If you were to just pull a number out of your brain.
So I remember last saving a version 59 of one of my essays. I went through, this is, by the way, the personal motivational essays, they call it. Career essays, I may have gone through maybe 13 drafts. So that was not bad.
But it's
The
not,
personal,
it's a lot still.
I know it is, I know. Because, you know, you have to constantly discipline yourself in terms of word count, right? So you want to make sure. So that 13, by the way, 13 was not bad. I was like, oh, 13, okay, great. You know, I'm done. 13 turns for me amounts in terms of days, if you want to know, that was about 3 days. If I had to devote about 4 hours a day, that I did. So I love writing in general. For me, that's therapy. So I would wake up early in the morning at 6 and do these essays and do them from like 6 to 8:30, go to work, come back at night, reapproach them with a fresh lens. So if in terms of after the initial cut was ready, the career essays were easy to do, relatively straightforward. The personal motivational essays, which were directly tied up to my personal narrative and storyline, those took a lot. I had to scrap 2 essays that I had put in a lot of work and restart them, not in terms of theme, but in terms of language. One of my mentors actually is part of that, again, FNF category, would always give me this feedback, which I want your audience to also know, is that it's not a writing competition. You would say it's a business school essay. So you have to be very clear in your messaging. And I think that was something I struggled with, because, you know,
you are, the better.
Exactly. Avoid being verbose, and shorter sentences. So my discipline, why I took 59 turns versus 13 turns, is because my sentences were very long. So I would measure the length of my sentences by the number of lines it would take in word. Sincere advice is, if a sentence is longer than 2 lines, it's not worth writing. Scrap it, make it into 3. So that shorter sentences was the key. And that is why I took a lot more turns. But that's my essay journey. All in all, that amounted to about a month and a half of actual writing, about a month odd of actual writing, minus the storyboard. So if you accumulate the two, it was about 2.5 months worth of work.
Got it. Okay. So I think this is good. I have you pinned down for a couple of sessions that I.
Wonderful. Anytime.
I'm going to reach out. Someone from the company is going to reach out to you.
Wonderful.
But Mehak, I really want to thank you for providing.
No, thank you. This was actually lots of fun. I do want to take this time to thank you and Payal, because you guys have been, I mean, for me, it's been life-changing what you guys have done. So thank you so much, because I read all kinds of fascinating stories of people who have benefited from your services. But when you actually go through it, you truly appreciate the person providing it. And for that, I just want to extend a very, very, very big thank you to both of you, not just in terms of, you know, putting out content that's very affordable and very easy to understand, but it's also that your customer service is very much on point, right? Like I remember having a bunch of queries, they get answered within 24 hours. Things like that really help us students plan our life better. So just thank you so much for everything and all the patience and just, you know, even this interview was great.
This last part is going to make the team so happy. So internally within the company, we track these things called our, what do you call it, our CSAT scores. So customer satisfaction, and we have this dashboard that's updated every hour. And
oh, lovely. Okay.
And everyone.
No, happy to. And Rajat, honestly, anyone who needs help, I really want to pay this forward. Many people have helped me in this journey, as I told you. So happy to help anyone who wants to reach out, even if it's a chat, 10-15 minute chat, want to connect. Happy to assist in any way I can.